Okay, so today we're basically going to look at shutter angle and its implementation on the Nikon Z8. If you're new to videography, you've surely heard the term shutter angle. You're like, what the heck is it? Well, shutter angle is basically, it goes back to the whole to film days. That's going to be on Saturday's video. Definitely tune in for that one. And there's going to be quite an in-depth talk and look at shutter angle. But for today, we're just going to take a look at the 180-degree shutter angle. So 180-degree shutter angle is, for most situations, is going to be the best case scenario, basically. So 180-degree shutter angle means you're going to get a little bit of blur between frames. You're going to get nice motion on your videos. With an implementation of shutter angle in this new firmware update, prior to this, every time you switch frame rate, so I like to shoot in a lot of different frame rates. As a wildlife videographer, you've got you'll be constantly changing frame rates from 8K 60, 4K 120, 4K 30, 4K 24, depending on what subject you're recording, depending on what you're trying to capture, the essence of whether you're planning on slowing it down later in post-processing or you want to play it at real time, you're going to want to have access to all those different frame rates. And the shutter angle basically means that when you set it to 180-degree shutter angle, every time you change frame rates now, you're basically at the correct shutter speed. You don't have to worry about shutter speed. Where prior to this, if you go from 60p to 24p, you've got to then change your shutter speed in accordance to the changing frame rate in order to get the desired shutter speed. Now with shutter angle, the camera is basically in automatic mode. It basically just, when you make that change, it automatically adjusts your shutter speed for you. So it's a fantastic update. It was probably one of the more requested updates from the videographer side of things. I know photographers might be a little disappointed with this firmware update. It doesn't have a lot of photography-based updates, but I think this was really about that new power zoom, and the shutter angle was thrown in as just a great new feature that, if you're new to videography, it makes things so simple. By changing your shutter angle to 180 degrees, as you change frame rates in your videos to shoot different frame rates, you're going to be at the correct shutter speed all the time, unless you want to take some creative license with it and adjust the shutter angle accordingly. But setting it to 180 degrees is basically the right decision all the time, unless you want to do something above and beyond that yourself. So this is great. If you're new to videography, you definitely want to make this change, and then we're going to demonstrate where you change it and then how to lock it off, so that if you shoot in banks like I do, I shoot in from bank A to bank D. This will now allow you to basically set it and forget it for 98% of your videography. Okay, let's start in on it. So first off, we're going to click menu and we're going to go to the G. So the G is the video side of the settings. When you're doing any changes on the Nikon Z8 camera, there's a photography side and a video side of it. So we want to make sure on the video side of it. So we're going to be in G for video. We're going to scroll down to G13. And this is where you see shutter mode, and it's going to automatically be set at speed. So we're going to change that to shutter angle. Now when you go back, you will see down here where it now says 180-degree shutter. And so it's changed from shutter speed, which would be 1/60th of a second, or be 1/120th of a second in 60p. Now at 180 degrees, it's going to be automatically picking 1/120th. So you don't have to think about it. It's great. It makes it it's so easy when you're changing frame rates, you're shooting different frame rates. You don't have to worry about the shutter speed anymore. Awesome update, and it's great. How I've set my camera up with the shooting banks is with the eye menu. When I click the eye, ideally when I do, I'm going to leave this over the frame rate. So this is where you can see right now the 8.3K 60p is highlighted for frame rate. The reason being is that, so when I push the eye menu button on the back here, automatically it's going to frame rate when I'm in video mode. So now all I need to do, when I spin the back dial, I can quickly go through all the different frame rates. Say I want to go from 8K 60 to 4K 120. I want to do some slow motion video where I'm going to be slowing it down in post. You basically, just by spinning the dial, when you half press the shutter button, it changes to the 4K 120. You can see up here, it's changed it to 4K 120. It's a beautiful way of doing it. I think a lot of times people will hit the I menu and then they start using the D-pad to move around, but you don't have to do that. So basically all I'm doing here, I hit the I button, then I'm just scrolling on the back button, and you can see how it's changing for the frame rates. Then when I partially engage the shutter, it will automatically jump to that new frame rate. It's an amazing way to basically switch. And if you are shooting a lot of different frame rates, it's a really nice, quick, and easy way to switch between them all. Okay, so now the one thing that you will notice, if you haven't seen that 180 degree pop up, it's still showing shutter speed. What's happened is in this latest firmware update, everything, you see the M up top and left here, this new update has changed all your banks back to P or program mode. So if you were set in aperture priority or manual mode, you do have to change it back to your desired mode. This also won't show if you're in aperture or shutter priority. You do have to be in manual mode. If you are shooting video with the Nikon Z8, I encourage you to definitely you want to shoot in manual mode. A lot of features are not available if you're not in manual mode. So manual mode with auto ISO and now with shutter angle, you are really getting into a almost an automatic setting mode for shooting video. So basically, your shutter speed with shutter angle is going to be predetermined, but whether if you pick 180 degrees, it's set, like I say, 98% of the time, it's going to be the correct shutter speed you want. Auto ISO is going to automatically kind of adjust the ISO to get your exposure correctly. And then from there, you can adjust the aperture or a neutral density filter on the front of your lens to help kind of manage the exposure on brighter days, for example. I find shooting with a 5.6 lens, in shooting with NRAW and N-Log, where my base ISO for auto ISO is 800, other than the brightest days, I'm able to, I'm finding my exposures are generally, I have no problems with my exposure except for on the brightest days where I might have to bump the aperture down a little bit. Or if you switch it out of auto ISO, you can go below 800 ISO, and that's a little trick. So like I said, with auto ISO, you can't go, it won't go below 800, but you can change it out of auto ISO and you can knock the ISO lower if needed. But I find for most situations as a wildlife photographer, that base ISO of 800 ISO, it might look really blown out in the viewfinder, but if you check your waveform, like you can see here, as long as you're not clipping those whites, NRAW has got incredible adjustability in DaVinci Resolve. You can really knock down. So as long as those whites aren't clipping at the top, they can be right up to the top. And in post-production, you can bring all of it back and it's totally protected the whites. It's an amazing, the Nikon Z8 is an amazing sensor for video. And like I said, it might appear that you've blown things right out, but as long as you're not clipping on that waveform, you're good to go, which is good, a really handy thing to know. So with this 180 degree shutter, it's kind of like I say, it's the perfect, it's going to be the perfect setting for most videos you're going to be recording. So what you want to do is you can lock it off. So you're going to click on the menu button. We're going to go down. We're going to be in the video side of it again. There are control lock for the photo side of it. We don't want to touch that. So with this, you've got two options about how you're going to lock this off. You've got control lock, which is a global, which basically locks it right off. You can turn the shutter speed lock on. And so the shutter speed lock is referring to the shutter angle here. So when you turn it on, you'll notice now there's a little L at the bottom there. So that's a quick and easy. If you're not going to be super creative with your videography, lock it 180 degrees, you're good to go. You just leave it there. I will find that there's instances where I do like to utilize 360 degree shutter. Like I said, we'll talk about that a bunch in the next video, but there is instances where I will like to go to a slower shutter speed. And I generally don't go to a higher shutter speed. Creatively, there is some reasons to do that. Again, we'll talk about that in the next video. But for now, we're just going to look at the option of being able to drop it down a little bit. And a big example of that would be owls in the forest, where in order to get my ISO a little bit lower, I want to shoot at the same shutter speed as the frame rate. So if I'm shooting at 30 frames per second, I want to shoot at 1/30th the second shutter speed. Because there's very little movement, it won't impact the video at all. So in order to access that, how I've set this up is we go back to menu, and we're going to go to custom controls. And what I've done here is that I don't utilize, so for my video mode, in order to record video, so I've set my camera up where the shutter button is my start and stop for video recording. So I kind of like that. I find the video record button is a little bit far over if you're stopping and starting a lot. So I set my shutter button up as my stop and start for recording video. So because of that, I have the video record button on the camera is open as a function button. And I have set that for lock mode. So what this means is that I've set this to control lock. So when I push that button along with the back dial on the camera, so if I push this button here with the back dial on the camera, you can see how the lock button, the lock goes on and off on the shutter angle. So that's a great way to access the lock feature without having to dive into menus. And it's something that I won't necessarily use a lot, but I do find there's instances where I will be changing the shutter speed essentially to 360 degrees. So when it's unlocked, I can change it to 360 degrees. So you notice how the ISO drops. And that's one of the big reasons you'd want to shoot at 360, to lower your ISO in low light conditions where you have very little movement of your subject or the camera. And that's, like I say, that lock feature. And then you just kind of set it back to 180, hold down the video record button, spin the back dial, and you're locked off again. Now I will do this for all of my shooting banks. So you can see my shooting, and you need to do this on every shooting bank in order to have access to it. With the video record button and the back dial, I can just turn that lock on and off. I find with a lot of my shooting banks, as much as I've got changes between them depending on subject matter, I try to keep a lot of the controls in a similar place, in a similar position. So you've got muscle memory. You just know where to find what you're looking for. And yeah, so that's the kind of the quick and easy of shutter angle with the new firmware 2.10 and how to set it up for the Nikon Z8, and just how you can go through and adjust it. And this will also work if you're shooting in H.265. You can still utilize the I menu to change shutter speeds along with shutter lock, and it will work for everything. And yeah, I said, and I've got in a few days I'll be posting the shutter angle video where we go do a deep dive into what shutter angle means, and then also how to apply it for dramatic effect in your videos. So yeah, thanks for joining me today. I have just set up a link to my PayPal account if you want to help me out and help me grow this channel. I appreciate any donations that can be made there, and I really appreciate that. And yeah, thanks for joining me. Please like and subscribe, and till next time, we'll see you out there. Take care. Thanks.